Hello, and welcome to the Inflectra webinar on Rapid Web UI Test Automation using Rapise. Today's presenter, Denis Markatsev from Inflectra, will be going through some of the challenges of automating a complex web application and providing solutions to some of the most common issues, including resilience in XPATH and also dealing with complex multi-layered applications.
Very well. Hello, I'm Denis. I'm one of creators of Rapise Test Automation tool. Web UI test automation is not as easy as we want it to be. There are still many open challenges in this field. So let's quickly go over a few of them that seem more serious to me, more complex to me. So the first one is cross-browser recording playback. So everyone wants that a test can be recorded, so when a user performs some actions, the tool just captures all the steps, and after that the test is immediately ready for execution and no tweaks are needed to a test. So this is something that everybody wants. And also when a test is recorded, then it should be ready to be played back across all various versions and types of browsers that we have currently available. So the second complex challenge is data loading delays. So when you load a page from a server, it always takes unpredictable time to load data. And every browser has some events that indicate that data loading is complete, but these days a lot of pages just use a AJAX request to get some data from the server after the page was loaded. So you never can be sure that all data is loaded and that data is available for display. So this is one of the challenges as well. And the third one, and this is the challenge that we devote most of our time today, is DOM element identification. So what it means? It means that if you recorded a test for each element, you have a XPATH or CSS, so it doesn't matter, you have a selector, and this selector must stay valid with time. So when an application is changed, the selector should be still valid. When the application is reloaded, the selector should be valid. As you will see later, this is not always the case, and there are common pitfalls along the way of recording reliable XPath selectors for elements. So let's go through them. So as I said, recorded tests should just work. That everybody wants it for years, and in some cases it really works. But there are still a lot of cases when the recorded test just fails at the first step, or maybe the second step. So we want that the test should work after recording. Also, we want that the test should work when it is included into a test suite. So you're probably familiar with situations when a test just works standalone. When you run it standalone, everything is fine, life is good. When you run the test within a test suite, and it is in the middle of the test suite, and it just unpredictably failed. So this also happens frequently. So, and if application is modified, we also want that our tests should just continue to work and do not require from us additional efforts to fix it. So let's go to the next slide. Automation projects, they are very different. So typically when you go to a conference, you always hear about the green square that you see here. It means that we are testing a new application which is developed in-house in our company. All elements have IDs assigned. Developers can do whatever you need to help you test the application. So this is an ideal situation, and in this case it's relatively easy to do test automation. So life becomes more complex when you are working in a company that already has some software developed. Developers have already left, and nobody knows how this application really works, and nobody is ready to change something in this application because the people just are afraid to break something. And management decided that, oh, we need to test this application, or we need to test some configuration of this application. So in this case, some docs may be available, so you may find out how this application was developed, what are internals of this application, but you cannot rely that developers will do something for you, and you should test the application as it is. And the life is very complex. This is the red square on this diagram is when you test an application that is completely developed by some other company, and you just configure and implement this application inside your environment in your company, and you just need to check that everything works as you expect. So this is like applications, CRM or ERP applications that you buy from other companies like Microsoft, and you need to configure this application, and you need to test that everything works fine. Also, such applications always allow some plugins, add-ons, and when you install all of them, you need to ensure that the application still works. So for you, this application is really a black box because companies developing such CRM or ERP applications, they do not share information about internals, how it was developed. You just have what you have, and you on your own trying to understand how this application really works inside. So today we'll mostly be talking about this red square. Okay, so let's see the typical test scenario that can happen with CRM or ERP application. So I will use live demonstration for typical application. So let's go here. Here is, for example, Dynamics Business Central. So this is a application from Microsoft, which is used for customer data management and for sales order processing. So what typically you do with such an application? So here is the very simple scenario. You go to a list of customers, you create a new customer, you fill some form with data. So here is the form. So let's give the name to this customer, close this customer, then search, for example, that this customer was added successfully. Then you open the customer and delete it from the system to move the system into initial state. So here is the typical example. This is very simple. There are much more complex scenarios that can be automated. So let's continue to our presentation. So, and what happens when you try to record such a scenario with some automation tool? So here is the typical situation. You record, you get some selectors for elements, you start playing back the test, and it just fails. It almost at the very beginning. So why it happened? So it can be even worse. Something may fail just immediately. So what are the reasons why this happened? So first, nowadays many applications just use dynamic IDs. So here you can see the button with ID, and this ID is different every time you load the application. So when you record the test, a selector is recorded and it is bound to this ID. Next time you go to the application, this ID is different and you cannot find the element. So the test is broken and you need to fix it in some way. Here we have more examples how IDs of elements can look these days. So, for example, they can be like semi-dynamic, so they may contain some meaningful information, and they also may contain some dynamic part, which is increasing every time you make a session with the application. So, for example, here we have generated ID at the end of our ID attribute. So dynamic ID is the number one reason why the recorded test just not working from the very beginning. Reason two, so weak attribute usage. So typically recording tools just stick to ID, maybe a couple of other attributes, and this is how typical selector may look. So just list some nodes in the DOM tree from the root to the leaf element, and this XPATH is not very meaningful. And if there are no ID attributes for the nodes in the middle of this path, then you just see this mess and you don't understand what will be with this element when there will be some small modifications to the application. So let's compare to this one. So if we could stick to selected attributes that we know are meaningful for this particular type of the application, then we can generate a very nice XPath that can be used for reliable identification of the element. So let's go next. Reason 3, this is my favorite here. So if you will go to W3C website and will read about what is ID attribute, you will learn that this attribute uniquely identifies an element on the page. Maybe in many cases this is so, but there are obviously cases, like you see on the screen, where IDs of elements, so two elements just may have the same ID. So and you cannot rely on ID to find the element. Also, there are cases when there are hidden layers. It means that you can log to an application, open some form. You fill this form and proceed to another form. And when you are filling another form, the first form is still in the DOM tree. And if you are running the test will be able to find elements in the form that is not displayed. So here, just different forms are stacked one on top of another. So, and this case just leads to a very big problem. So you can record a test, you can execute this test, and it will be performing some steps without any visual effect. And it will be very hard to understand where it really breaks. Okay, so let's see here some details about hidden layers. So if you recorded form by ID, so it's not clear what real form you will be selecting during execution of the test. So there are various ways how to fix this problem. Maybe these forms have some other attributes that can be used to identify the form. Or maybe we can just always work with the topmost form on the page. So this can help us to always work with a part of the application that is really visible on screen. Okay, so to analyze the application and to discover such complex things that we just see a couple of slides ago, we need tools. So we need tools to detect that an application has dynamic IDs. We need to analyze attributes of the application and be able to find out uh, what attributes can be used to reliably find an element and what attributes are just something related to presentation, or they have some dynamic nature and we just better to not use those attributes at all. So we need a way to analyze classes. Some classes are really useful and some classes are just have no meaning for identification because they are related to such things as coloring or styling. Okay, so let's go through these tools one by one. So in Rapise, we have a spy application which allows you to inspect the DOM tree of a page. And this spy is cross-browser. It works with any browser. And using it, you can quickly query for all values of a particular attribute, and you can easily understand that, for example, ID attribute has some dynamic values, and you should ignore these dynamic values when you record selectors. So another useful tool is that you should be able to compare DOM trees of the same page. So if there are dynamic attributes, then when you open the DOM tree of the same page saved from different sessions with the application, you'll be able to do a query through both versions of the DOM tree and compare attributes and see what the differences are and how you can reliably generate XPATH selector for an element. Also, you can save the DOM tree and then analyze it to find out what attributes are really useful, meaningful to identify an element on the page. So here I have a simple diagram that was built with a pretty simple Python program. If you are interested, you can just shoot us an email at rapise@inflectra.com and we'll just send you the link to this Python program that you can use to analyze the DOM tree and in such simple and visual form see what attributes have meaning to identify elements on this page. So we believe that when you generate XPath for an element, it should be minimal. It should contain just minimal set of parts that are really needed to identify the element. So let's compare one. So here what we do, we just enumerate all the nodes from the root till the element that we need. And in the second case, we just select the element that we need. So what is bad about the case number one? If layout of the page is changed, if something will be inserted before this div, for example, then first XPath expression just will become invalid and you will not be able to find the element. So the second variant is much more stable to changes to the layout of the application. So also, it makes sense to define anchors. So let me explain in more details what the anchor is. So here we have an example of a table actually. So these days, tables in some cases are not really created with table tag in HTML. So more and more tables are created with divs and with such roles like grid, row, and cell. So how to if we will be recording a test and we'll be recording an XPATH expression for this particular cell, it would be very nice if we would link this cell expression to expression that finds the root of the table. So when we search for the cell, we always want to search for the cell from the root of a table. So what can be needed? So for example, you may have some other spans on the page with such title composer. And if you will be just using this part, it can be ambiguous. And if you will be creating the full XPath expression and enumerating all the nodes, it also may be not so useful. But if you link it to the root of the table, when you look at this expression in your test, you can quickly understand that you are working with a table and you are selecting a cell in the table. And if something is changed to the table root, to its location, you can parameterize this part of XPath expression and can easily fix XPath expressions of cells. Okay, so more about defining anchors. Okay, so here is the anchor that can be used for the case of hidden DOM layers that I showed a few minutes ago. So this anchor always selects the topmost view on the page. So it is just an example. It is a specific expression for Dynamics Business Central application. So for other applications, it may look different. But when you generate an expression for an element in a form, and if you always add this anchor to the element, you will be always reliably finding this element during test playback. So having this information, when you know what attributes to use to reliably identify an application, what classes have some meaning to element identification, and what anchors you have on the page that can be used to produce more stable XPath selectors. So you can just combine this in a web profile. So here is a JSON file that Rapise understands. So given this information, Rapise recorder will be just generating such XPath expressions that we want, and that can survive to small modifications of the application, and also it's very easy to understand what XPath expression does when it is minimal and when it has good attributes in it. So let's go to the next slide. So let's see it in action. So let me put it here, just refresh this page. Here is Rapise. So I'm going to create a new test here. Create it locally. let's with today's date, and it will be cross browser test. I'll be using Firefox for recording. I'll be using visual representation of the test. Okay, let's go. So press record button and start recording my screen. So let's go to customers. So my actions are in the dialog. You can see at the top right corner. So let's click new button. Okay, let's click OK here. So I'm just repeating this scenario. Okay, created the customer, closing the customer, and now I want to search for it. Okay, found it. Going into customer and deleting it. Okay, and let's go to the home page. Okay, all steps captured. So I'm pressing finish here. Inserting my steps. So this is visual representation of my test case. So we click on the customers, then click on the new entry, then click OK, click on the name field, enter text, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's run our test on this application to see how it works. And then I will show you some internals. Okay, works so far. Okay, so it works. Here we have an object tree. So let's expand and see what XPATH expressions we have for the element. So for example, here I select create a new entry element, and let's go to its XPath expression, so to see how it looks like. So in Rapise supports nested frames transparently. So here you can see the first part of expression, then selects the frame where the data is loaded. So here is the placeholder that divides, it designates the border between frames. And then you can see this anchor that was used to generate the expression. And here we have a selector for the button with specific title and role. So, and other elements have similar locators. So how it works? So let's go to files and pressing the Ctrl+Shift+E shortcut to add Rapise engine to our project. Expand the library, and here we have a library for Dynamics NF and Dynamics Business Central. What we need to open here is Dynamics NF. Okay, so, and here we have the web profile that just lists the attributes that Rapise Recorder should use to generate XPath expressions. So for some attributes, we can pass additional parameters, like we do not want to record each ref attribute if it starts from JavaScript, because it's something internal. And also, for example, let's see here ID. So we record IDs only in this case if ID is not empty, and we are excluding IDs. Here is the regular expression. We exclude IDs that contain digits or IDs that contain just 5 letters in it. So all other IDs are not dynamic, and they can be used to identify an element in this Business Central application. Also here we have a list of classes that may help us to identify an element reliably, and here we have the list of anchors that we always add to XPATH expressions of elements on a page. So here is the web profile and how it works. So let's return to the slides here. So to summarize this session, so automation engineers, they demand reliable recording. They want that recorded test just works from the beginning. If you are using a generic tool, then in some cases, without additional configuration, the quality of recorded XPath selectors is pretty poor. And if the tool contains some tools that help automation engineer to explain to the tool what attributes and anchors to use for recording, then the tool may do a greater job. So Rapise is such a tool, so it supports such things as web profiles. So when you explain the nature of the application to Rapise, it records very nice XPath selectors, and you just don't need to do anything to recorded steps to make them working after recording.
Thanks for watching today's video on software testing of a web application using Rapise. If you'd like to learn more about software testing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.